Neoma's misfortune, Part 2.
Nneoma leaned out of the carriage, hoping to catch a glimpse of where they were headed, but the darkness revealed nothing. Obina, she said nervously, we've been traveling for hours. Are we close? Patience, my love, we're almost there. The reassurance felt hollow, but Nneoma said nothing more. She clutched the necklace around her neck, its cool beads offering a strange kind of comfort. Finally, the carriage emerged from the dense forest, revealing a clearing where a massive structure stood. It was unlike anything Nneoma had ever seen. The house was built from dark stone, its walls towering and imposing. Instead of the familiar thatched roof of Omuagu's homes, this building had a steep, slate roof that gleamed under the faint moonlight. Lanterns burned dimly along the path leading to the entrance, casting airy shadows that danced across the walls. Surrounding the house was an overgrown garden, filled with plants Nneoma did not recognize. "This is your home?" Nneoma asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Yes," Obina replied. "It is old, but it is strong, just like our love will be." Nneoma forced a smile, but the house unsettled her. The entrance doors creaked open as they approached, revealing a dimly lit hall. The interior was vast, with high ceilings and walls adorned with masks and carvings that seemed ancient and otherworldly. Several servants emerged, their heads bowed. They were silent as they took Nneoma's belongings and led her deeper into the house. Obina placed a hand on her shoulder. "You must be tired. I'll have food prepared, and then you can rest." Nneoma nodded, though she couldn't shake the unease creeping over her. She followed a servant up a winding staircase to a large room with heavy wooden furniture and thick curtains that blocked out the moonlight. The servant bowed and left without a word, leaving Nneoma alone. She sank onto the bed. Later that night, Nneoma joined Obina in the dining hall. A long table stretched across the room, laden with dishes of steaming food. The variety was impressive: roasted meats, spiced stews, and fresh fruits, but the atmosphere was eerily quiet. Weeks, and Nneoma began to feel the weight of her isolation. Obina often left the house, claiming to attend to his trade, but he never explained where he went or how long he would be gone. The servants, though attentive, were distant and spoke little. Nneoma tried to engage them in conversation, but their responses were short and evasive. Loneliness began to gnaw at her, and she found herself yearning for the lively chatter of Omuagu, the warmth of her parents' home, and the bustling market days. One stormy afternoon, as rain lashed against the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance, Nneoma found herself standing before the locked door again. The house felt emptier than usual, and her curiosity burned brighter than her caution. She examined the lock, running her fingers over its rusted surface. A sudden idea struck her. She remembered seeing a ring of keys on a hook in the kitchen. Quietly, she retrieved the keys and returned to the door, trying to open it. The door creaked as it swung inward, revealing a dark staircase that descended into the depths of the house. Nneoma hesitated, her heart pounding. The air wafting from the cellar was cool and damp, carrying a strange metallic scent. She lit a lantern from a nearby table and stepped cautiously onto the first step. What lay beyond that door would unravel secrets more terrifying than Nneoma could have imagined. Nneoma descended the staircase slowly, each step creaking under her weight. The lantern in her hand cast flickering shadows on the damp stone walls, making the narrow passage seem alive. The metallic scent grew stronger, mingled with a faint, earthy odor. She reached the bottom of the stairs and stepped into a large, dimly lit chamber. The space was vast, with stone pillars supporting the low ceiling. Around the room were various objects, wooden crates, clay pots, and shelves lined with jars filled with strange substances. At the center of the room stood a table, its surface covered in papers and artifacts that looked ancient. Nneoma's eyes widened as she approached the table, her curiosity overpowering her fear. The papers were covered in strange symbols and markings, unlike any writing nneoma had ever seen. Some of the artifacts appeared to be ceremonial items, carved figures, small statues, and masks similar to those that adorned the house. On one side of the table lay a large, leather-bound book. Its cover was cracked and worn, and when Nneoma opened it, she found pages filled with drawings of rituals, strange creatures, and what appeared to be maps of unfamiliar lands. "What is this place?" she whispered to herself. Gathering her courage, Nneoma pulled the curtain aside. Behind it was another chamber, smaller but even more unsettling. The walls were covered in symbols painted in red, and in the center of the room was a low stone altar. On it lay several objects: a knife with an intricately carved handle, a bundle of feathers tied with twine, and a clay bowl filled with what appeared to be dried blood. Nneoma's breath quickened. The room exuded an ominous energy, as if the walls themselves were watching her. She took a step back, her mind racing with questions. What was this place? Why had Obina kept it hidden? "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer came, but she thought she heard faint footsteps descending. The footsteps grew louder, and soon a figure appeared at the bottom of the stairs. It was Obina, his face calm but his eyes filled with something Nneoma couldn't decipher. "Nneoma," he said, his voice steady. "What are you doing down here?" I was curious," she stammered, trying to sound braver than she felt. "You never told me about this part of the house." Obina stepped closer, his gaze intense. "This is not a place for you," he said firmly. "These are remnants of my family's past, things better left undisturbed." "What kind of past?" Nneoma demanded, her fear giving way to anger. "What are you hiding, Obina? This room, this house, it feels wrong." Obina's expression softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "I promise you, my love, there is nothing here that can harm you. But some secrets are too heavy to share. Trust me, and let this place remain in the shadows where it belongs." Nneoma hesitated, torn between her growing distrust and her desire to believe him. Finally, she nodded. "All right," she said quietly. "I won't come down here again." That evening, the atmosphere in the house was tense. Obina was unusually quiet, and Nneoma couldn't shake the feeling that she had crossed a line. She replayed the events in her mind, wondering what secrets the cellar held and why Obina was so adamant about keeping her away from it. As they sat together in the dining hall, Obina finally spoke. "I know this house is different from what you're used to," he said. "But it is ours now. We must make it a home." Nneoma forced a smile. "I understand," she said, though her heart was far from settled. That night, Nneoma's sleep was restless. She dreamed of the cellar, the strange symbols on the walls, and the objects on the altar. In her dream, the walls seemed to close in around her, the symbols glowing with an eerie light. She woke with a start, drenched in sweat. The room was silent, but the unease lingered. She glanced at Obina, who lay beside her, his face peaceful in slumber. For the first time since their wedding, Nneoma felt truly alone. The following day, as Obina left for one of his mysterious trips, nneoma decided she needed answers. She ventured to a nearby village, guided by rumors she had heard from the servants about a wise seer who could see into the unknown. The seer, an elderly woman with piercing eyes and a voice that seemed to echo with the wisdom of generations, welcomed nneoma into her modest hut. "What troubles you, child?" the seer asked, her gaze penetrating. "My husband," nneoma began hesitantly. "There is a part of his life he keeps hidden, and I fear it may bring harm." The seer closed her eyes and hummed softly, her hands moving over a bowl filled with cowries. She cast the cowries onto a mat and studied their pattern for a long moment. "There is darkness around your husband," she said finally. "His wealth and charm are not without cost. You must tread carefully, for the path ahead is fraught with danger." Nneoma's heart sank. "What can I do?" she asked. The seer handed her a small pouch filled with herbs. "Keep this with you at all times," she said. "It will protect you from harm. And trust your instincts, for they will guide you when the time comes." As nneoma returned to the house, her mind raced with the seer's words. The life she had dreamed of was unraveling, and the darkness she had sensed in Obinna now felt closer than ever. That evening, Obinna returned. His mood was light, his charm in full display as he recounted tales of trade and negotiations. But nneoma couldn't meet his gaze for long. The seer's words weighed heavily on her, making her question everything about her husband. "You seem distant," Obinna remarked as they dined. "Is something troubling you?" "No," nneoma replied, forcing a smile. "Just adjusting to life here. It's different." That night, as nneoma lay in bed, she was awakened by a faint sound, a low murmuring, almost like whispers carried by the wind. She sat up, her heart pounding, and strained to listen. The sound seemed to come from the direction of the cellar. Her pulse quickened as she remembered the eerie symbols and objects she had seen. Was it her imagination, or was the house truly alive with secrets? Quietly, she slipped out of bed and lit a lantern. She tiptoed through the hallways, the whispers growing louder as she approached the cellar door. To her surprise, the door was slightly ajar. A soft, flickering light emanated from within, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Nneoma descended the stairs cautiously, each step sending a shiver down her spine. When she reached the bottom, she froze at the sight before her. Obinna stood at the altar, his back to her. He was dressed in a dark robe. He was chanting in a language Nneoma didn't understand, his voice deep and resonant. The air in the room felt heavy, almost suffocating, and the metallic scent was stronger than ever. Nneoma's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to call out to him, to demand an explanation, but fear rooted her in place. As if sensing her presence, Obinna turned suddenly, his eyes widening in shock. "Nneoma, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing." She shot back, her voice trembling. "What is this? What are you doing?" Obinna stepped toward her, his expression a mixture of anger and regret. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said quietly. "See what?" "The truth." Nneoma's voice rose, her fear giving way to anger. "What kind of man performs rituals in secret? What are you hiding from me?" Obinna sighed. "It's not what you think," he said. "This is a tradition, a legacy passed down through my family. It's how we protect what we have." "Protect or control?" Nneoma demanded. Obinna didn't answer. Instead, he gestured for her to leave. "Go back upstairs. I'll explain everything in the morning." "No," Nneoma said firmly. "You'll explain now." "This house," he said, gesturing around them, is more than a home. It's a sanctuary, a connection to the spirit that has blessed my family for generations. nneoma stared at him in disbelief. You've built your life on this, on sacrifices and rituals. It's not as simple as you think, Obina replied. I've never hurt anyone, nneoma. But this legacy is what makes everything we have possible. nneoma's mind raced. The seer's warnings now made perfect sense. She realized that Obina's charm and wealth were not the result of hard work or fortune, but of dark dealings that she couldn't accept. Why didn't you tell me? nneoma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I knew you wouldn't understand, Obina said. But everything I've done for us, for our future. nneoma shook her head, stepping back toward the stairs. This isn't the life I want. This isn't the man I thought I married. But Obina said nothing more. He simply turned back to the altar, his expression unreadable. As nneoma climbed back up the stairs, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal. She knew she couldn't stay in the house, but escaping wouldn't be easy. She clutched the pouch of herbs tightly, silently thanking the seer for her wisdom. Whatever lay ahead, nneoma resolved to fight for her freedom, even if it meant facing the darkness that bound her to Obina. That night, nneoma had another restless sleep. This time, her dreams were vivid and terrifying. She was in the cellar again, but the symbols on the walls glowed brightly, and a figure loomed in the shadows. The figure stepped closer, revealing itself to be a spirit, a woman with shimmering, otherworldly skin and eyes that burned like fire. Her voice echoed, deep and resonant, as she spoke. You have entered the web of the pact, the spirit said. To leave would unravel its threads, and the consequences will be dire. Your husband has bound you to his fate. But beware, he is not the master of this house. I am. The spirit reached out, and nneoma woke with a start, gasping for air. The room was dark, but she felt the lingering presence of the spirit. Her skin prickled with fear, and she clutched the herb pouch tightly. The dream strengthened nneoma's resolve. She could no longer wait for answers to come to her. The cellar held the key to understanding the depth of Obina's ties to the spirit, and she needed to know the full truth before she could make her escape. The following evening, when Obina left the house for one of his trips, nneoma made her move. She retrieved the lantern, slipped the herb pouch into her pocket, and descended into the cellar once more. This time, she explored more thoroughly. She examined the strange book on the table, flipping through its pages and studying the symbols and rituals. Though she couldn't read the language, she recognized drawings that matched the altar and other items in the cellar. Then, something caught her eye, a faint crack in the wall near the altar. It was subtle, almost invisible, but when she pressed her hand against it, she felt a slight give. nneoma pushed harder, and the wall shifted, revealing a hidden passage. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside, holding the lantern high. The passage led to a cavernous room filled with shadows and strange sounds. At first, nneoma thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, but as she moved deeper, the lantern's light revealed a horrifying sight. Bones, piles of them, scattered across the floor and arranged in strange patterns. Some were animal bones, but others were unmistakably human. nneoma's stomach churned, and she had to steady herself against the wall to keep from fainting. In the center of the cavern was a larger altar, more elaborate than the one in the cellar. It was surrounded by candles that burned with an unnatural green flame, casting an eerie glow over the room. As nneoma stood in horror, the air in the cavern grew heavy, and the temperature dropped. The same spirit from her dream appeared, materializing out of the shadows. "You should not have come here," the spirit said, its voice echoing. Nneoma trembled but forced herself to speak. "What is this place? What do you want from us?" "This is the heart of the pact," the spirit replied. "Your husband's family made a bargain long ago. In exchange for power and wealth, they pledged their loyalty and their blood." "Blood," Nneoma repeated, her voice shaking. "The offerings you see are the price of their prosperity," the spirit continued. "And now that you are bound to him, the pact demands your loyalty as well." Nneoma stepped back, shaking her head. "No, I won't be part of this. I didn't agree to any of it." The spirit's eyes glowed brighter. "Defiance comes at a cost, child. If you wish to escape, you must break the bond, but doing so will unleash consequences far worse than you can imagine." Nneoma turned and ran, clutching the help pouch and the lantern tightly. The spirit's laughter echoed behind her, chilling her to the bones. As she emerged into the main house, she heard the distant sound of a carriage approaching. Obina was returning. Nneoma knew she couldn't confront him, not yet. She needed time to plan her escape, to find a way to break the bond without unleashing the horrors the spirit had warned of. But one thing was clear: she could no longer trust the man she had once loved. The house was eerily quiet as Nneoma descended the stairs. The faint metallic scent of the cellar seemed stronger now, as if the air itself knew of her intent and sought to dissuade her. The hidden passage she had discovered the night before beckoned her. She pressed against the wall, feeling the cold stone shift beneath her palm, and stepped inside. She tightened her grip on the bundle, whispering to herself, "I can do this. I must do this." Nneoma stepped forward, laying the seer's tools on the altar. She arranged them according to the instructions. As she began the counter-ritual, the air grew heavy, and the cavern trembled slightly. A voice echoed around her, deep and otherworldly. "You dare to defy me?" Nneoma turned to see the spirit materialize from the shadows, its fiery eyes blazing with fury. "You were warned," it said. "The pact is unbreakable." Nneoma's hands trembled, but she stood her ground. "I didn't agree to this pact. It was forced on me, and I won't let it control my life." The spirit laughed, a chilling sound that reverberated through the cavern. "You are bound by the bloodline. There is no escape. I'll make my own way," Nneoma said firmly. She began to chant the words the seer had taught her, pouring all her focus and energy into the ritual. The spirit roared, and the cavern shook violently. Bones scattered. As the ritual progressed, Nneoma felt a sharp pain in her chest, but kept going. The spirit loomed closer, its form shifting and twisting. "If you break the bond, you will lose everything," it warned. "Your wealth, your power, even your life." "I'd rather lie free and poor than die a prisoner," Nneoma shot back. With a final, desperate surge of energy, she completed the chant. The spirit let out an ear-piercing scream, and the ground beneath Nneoma's feet cracked. When the light faded, the spirit was gone. She dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She had done it. She had severed the bond. But the seer's warning echoed in her mind. Breaking the bond came at a cost. As Nneoma made her way back through the tunnel, she noticed cracks forming in the walls. Nneoma ran outside, watching in horror as the once magnificent structure collapsed into a heap of rubble. The wealth, the grandeur, everything Obina's family had built on the foundation of the pact, it was all gone. As the dust settled, a carriage pulled up to the ruins. Obinna leaped out, his face a mixture of shock and fury. What happened? He demanded, grabbing nneoma by the shoulders. The bond is broken, nneoma said quietly. Obinna stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. Do you realize what you've done? Everything we had, everything my family built, it's gone. It wasn't worth the cost, nneoma replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. We were living under a curse, Obinna. Now we're free. Obinna's face twisted with anger and despair. Free? From what? You've destroyed us, nneoma. You've destroyed me. He turned and walked away, leaving nneoma standing alone amidst the ruins. Nneoma took a deep breath. The weight of the past finally lifted from her shoulders. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was free. Free to build a new life, untainted by the darkness of Obinna's family. As she walked toward the village, she felt a glimmer of hope. The spirit's grip was gone, and for the first time in years, she felt truly alive. She made her way to the neighboring village, built a little hut. She was ashamed of going back home to the people she belittled and mocked all her life. She learned her lesson. Made a humble friend called Ada. They both go to the stream and fetch firewoods together. She became her humble and better self from that day on, leaving her pride life behind.